Okay, good afternoon. So my name's Graham Braithwaite, and I am the Director of Transport Systems here at Cranfield University, and I'm the principal investigator on the grant that was behind this particular building, the Digital Aviation Research and Technology Centre. So on behalf of the university, I wanted to give you a very, very warm welcome. Apologies I was not here a little bit earlier, a small position navigation and timing issue, but it's nice to be here now. And I hope you're enjoying this facility. So I just wanted to tell you a tiny bit about it and what we're doing research-wise. But just as an introduction to who I am, so I hold a few roles here at Cranfield. One is as Professor of Safety and Accident Investigation. And I joined Cranfield about 20 years ago to look at that. So I'm really hoping that with that hat on, you drive as little business my way as you possibly could. But actually, more seriously, what we're trying to do on that front is make sure that those who have a role in safety of learning from the things that go badly, but also learning from the things that go well, feed that back into the system rapidly. And I think that's an incredibly important thing, that whatever we learn along the way, we have to have a way of sharing that information in a trusted environment and feeding it back into how we learn. But I also have a role as the accountable manager for our flying operation, covering our manned flight. So some of you may have seen on the way in the Saab 340, which was converted for us and delivered in 2021. Some of you may have even flown in its predecessor, which was the Jetstream aircraft. And for us, what this is about is translating the theory into practice. So if you did aeronautical engineering, I'm sure you stared at a whiteboard or a blackboard for hours at a time trying to fathom out what algebra translated into. But once you got, in this case, into an aeroplane and we demonstrated what a stall feels like, or what happens when the yaw damper's turned off, then it probably translated into something more meaningful. And I think that's Cranfield's job, is to sit there between pure academia and industrial application to help people move it up that technology readiness level. And I think to be able to do that, that's why it's important that the staff and the people that work at Cranfield don't just learn about the theory of aviation, but actually do some of it for real. And I can tell you that having an aircraft taken off the US register, modified back to the European register, modified to a special purpose aircraft whilst leaving the EU during a global pandemic is the reason that I also have a lot less hair than I had 3 years ago. It's hard. And it's hard because there are things along the way that you don't necessarily expect will happen. But I want to particularly talk about DARTeC, if I may. So you've seen this fantastic building. We've got a lot of people to thank for this. And it's not just the people that work in here, it's the architects who we actually spend some time with to say, this is what we want to do research-wise. And there's a lot of different research projects that will happen over the life of this building. And then to translate that into something that is truly beautiful is quite a talent, actually. And so where you're sat now is exactly where the students who go and fly in the flying lab would come and do their pre-flight briefing so that they can act as task specialists. But also, whilst they're here, participate in some of the research we do in this case, around passenger experience. So how people travel through an airport terminal in that sense, and everything around you, whether it's the speakers, the cameras, and so on, all have different functions for how people work within this particular building. But if I show you probably my only text slide, this is what we set out to do. It was some years ago, we sat down to have a conversation about what people were calling digital aviation. And the one thing you know about that term is it means a whole bunch of different things to different people. But what it's about are the opportunities that increasingly digitalized systems can do for everything from passenger experience to how it is that we seize the opportunities around unmanned flight and how we mix that with traditional modes of flight. So you'll see some of the things. And the most important things with these were conversations across quite a diverse community. It's not just engineers saying, I could do this cool engineering thing. It was also about those at the business end and saying, and how do we help with the business transformation so that this becomes an application that serves society's needs or has a particular business need and so on. So you'll see some things that are relevant to yourselves and some things that maybe don't seem quite as relevant, and somewhere they come together quite nicely. So you'll see, for example, at the end, we talk about things to do with aircraft reliability. And it's the reason we have that beautiful hangar roof there with an aircraft in, so that we look at what tools we can use to better maintain aircraft into the future, whether that be drones flying in that area, which can be beautifully netted off, whether it's crawling robots or whether it's systems that are actually mounted on cameras in the structure of the building. Every part of this building does something pretty special. And if I put that into a graphical form, it looks something a bit like this. And that the role of the research centre here is about, well, probably digital systems integration. How do the pieces come together? Because there's some really exciting opportunities around how we control traffic in the air. And there's some really exciting things about what we should do with flight vehicles that a couple of years ago, I would have never envisaged. But the more you talk to some of the innovators out there, the more you realize what we can do. But then also some of the challenges that come from that in terms of competing for airspace or potentially the effects we have on the environment or the effects we have on people around us. So it was one of the reasons that when this opportunity came along, and it came along because of the UK's main funding agency, UKRI as it's known, has a part of it that was called Research England. And what they really wanted to do was create the opportunity for universities to build world-class research facilities with their industrial partners. And the very generous offer they made is, we will give you £1 for every £2 you get from industry. And the only criteria was that the minimum they would give you is £10 million. So it required finding 20 million from industry. And the two research centres you can see over there, the Aerospace Integration Research Centre, which is partnered with Rolls-Royce and Airbus. And this one came about through that scheme. And it's a stunning scheme because what it actually allowed all of these partners to do was bring the things that they have of value. And that ranges from data to hardware. So in this lab here, you'll see hardware from Thales. On the roof just outside, you'll see hardware from Aviation. And then what you won't see is what's pulsing through our supercomputer in terms of data from the likes of Heathrow or from Boeing or from Etihad and so on. And what they really wanted out of this research centre was what you were all doing instead of coming back to your seats at 3:05, which is having conversations. We had just as many conversations about how to build really good research labs as we did about how to make sure we have really good coffee in the building, and somewhere where people could have those serendipitous chance meetings with people that they never imagined they might work together to do something that nobody had ever done before. And that really is the magic. So actually, you know, I know some people have been worried about the schedule slipping. I thought it was brilliant. The conversation that was going on is a reminder of why it's important to create research spaces like this. Because there's lots of versions of the future, and you've got your own version of the future. And the refreshing thing about working in a university is that every student has a bright idea that perhaps the rest of us didn't necessarily think of. And our challenge is how to join all this up. At the point that electric flight or remote operated flight or hydrogen flight starts to become more of a reality, it opens up opportunities in terms of, for example, regional aviation connectivity, but only if we can do something about airspace design and airspace operation that goes with it, and so on. And the challenge is how you do all of those things in a vaguely linked together way. Because that management of change is not simple. We all share the same frustrations. And having done some work with the CAA a few years ago on safety assurance, I developed a whole new appreciation for the challenge that a regulator faces in trying to deal with, you know, the traveling public's safety, the perceptions of risk, and yet just how fast the innovators want to run, not just in the space that you operate in, but in multiple spaces along the way. And that's even before we throw in the magic leaving Europe challenge. Right? So we do need to think about how we do this and how we link it together. And that only works with some open conversations. A couple of things that when you leave the building that you might not be able to see, and some of you may have experienced, just in the building over there, is one component of what we call the Cranfield Global Research Airport, and that's our digital air traffic control tower. So this is a Saab technology. It was the first tower to be approved for use in the UK, and it gives us a tool. And there's lots of tools here where we have to strike that balance between being a fully licensed aerodrome and needing to make sure that our aerodrome inspector is comfortable that we can operate in that way, and being a university that's different to the average major airport. You know, we're not Heathrow, we're not Gatwick. We can close to do something and control the risk associated with that. Whereas, as we know with Gatwick, you close for a few days, especially in the run-up to Christmas, and everybody notices, not in a good way. So we like to see ourselves as being a place where you can do some of that science, but recognizing the constraints that come from having to do it within a regulated environment. I think that's important. And same with some of the technology that if you went around the back of the building, you might see. I think I have one last slide, if I remember rightly. There we go. It's the one with my name on. It's not the one I remembered at all. But really, it was just to say, I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight into what this research centre is about. It's not just about those partners that you saw. It can be about a small project for a master's student or for a PhD student. The slide that I clearly managed to delete off was actually about a partnership that we set up with the CAA through the CAAI arm. And it was very specifically about how do we develop regulators and the regulated entities for that massive amount of transformational change that is happening. And we actually set it up as a part-time master's and under the government's apprenticeship scheme. And it was in part so that regulators, you know, who actually have got a pretty tough job to keep up with some of the innovation that's going on there and still attract good people into the regulator without the gold-plated pensions that used to be in that sector, you know, that those communities understand each other. So it's important for us to have regulated entities that understand the process of regulation, particularly in a risk-based environment, and vice versa. So that was the last thing I wanted to say, is that actually one of the challenges of change is about making sure that the future generation can pick up the baton from where we've delivered it to. So thank you very much for that opportunity. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day in this building, and please come back and share coffee with us in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham, very much for this overview of this facility, and thanks again actually for hosting us today. Everybody agrees with me that it's a beautiful facility, beside being a very innovative facility. Thank you again.